This is the Worship Team Training Podcast with your host and training director, Brannon Dempsey. Worship Team Training provides live workshops and online resources to help inspire, create, and transform the leading of worship. Now, here's your host, Brannon Dempsey.
And what's up, people? What's going on? Thanks, Chris. What's up, everybody? Say hello.
Hey.
McClurg. And also Ryan Clair with us. Brannon Dempsey here at Worship Team Training. And Barry is back over there. What's up, Barry? He's like, Barry's behind the scenes, man. He's the dude. So, what's up, everybody? We just wanted to come to you tonight. We're doing a conference out at Barry's Church here in Janesville. We've been talking about that for the past month. But the main thing is that we've been just talking about worship. We've been talking about the reasons of why we gather. But it's not about a style, but it's more about authenticity. So that's our listeners, our watchers right now are going through that. So you guys that are watching, we want you to comment because we can, just like that, we can find out who's on the phone, and then you can just type in your comment, question, we'll get to it. Same thing, playback. Thank you guys for watching and listening. So what's up with this worship stuff? What do you think that, we've been doing this now for like 20 years. We got the same sound. We have this, I got to be like somebody else church. I had to be like this album that I see. But do you really think, is that where we're headed? Or do we really need, is there a call to go back to basics? What do you think?
I would say just out of the gate, the biggest thing for us in the conferences that we've done, anybody who's seen any of us play in the last year has always been, the reaction has always been coming to the table and saying, I just love how real you guys are. Like, I literally feel the pureness of what you're doing. And a lot of that is because we're not trying to let production get in the way. It's like when you hear those, you see those moments like in a sermon where, your pastor is preaching a sermon and then he just stops in the moment and just says, I just want to be real with you this week. This happened or whatever. And all of a sudden everybody is engaged again, is paying attention again. And I think with worship, especially with where it is right now, the thing that I'm finding is that for us, some of the best nights in our sets are when I'll completely forget the words to a song, or we have to start the song over and everybody in the room just laughs. And all of a sudden they're like loosened up again and ready to re-engage because they feel just an honesty and a transparency about what we're doing. And a lot of it has nothing to do with the lights in the show. In a lot of ways, you should be able to strip all that away and have it be just as good. Yeah,
but you realize you're taking that away from people who want that.
Yeah.
So, but is that, Are we? We're talking about this at dinner. Are we intrigued by the what was it, Kevin? You called it the worship. Or no, Ryan. I can't remember who said it. Yes, he said it. Right there.
Jeremy,
come on in, Jeremy. Come on, stand right next to Kevin here.
Hey, what's up?
You were talking about the worship of production. Can you come down from your clouds and join us?
Scooch in.
So we can get you in the camera. And you're already on audio here, so we got your audio. But we were talking about the worship of production. This is Jeremy, everybody, right here.
Hi.
You can barely see him. He doesn't want. I don't think he wants to be seen. So now, what's his name? He's out. Anthony's just coming. Just
I'm just saying.
Side. All right, so
Why don't you lay across us?
And we're all friends. We're all friends, Anthony. So it's all good.
I know.
Just join the club, man. So what's up? Worship of production or worship of the one true God?
Wow. I don't know. It just seems that worship has become worshipped. Like that whole... And maybe it's the production aspect of it, but it just seems like it's gotten so big and so grand that there's a disconnect with people, and it's more,
What's the disconnect?
Maybe that you can come and just kind of observe and watch this grand spectacle.
Is that like stepping into Walmart? Because people do the same thing. They just stand there and they don't move.
Yeah.
Or like going to McDonald's.
Yeah. And it's easier to do it because we're just concerned about how we present it and having it clean and perfect and I don't know that we're focusing always on actually worshiping the Lord with that. I don't know.
No. So why does it need to be perfect, Kevin?
Why does it need to be perfect?
Is that really a goal?
Right.
you think?
Maybe we've told ourselves, or maybe just our own expectations of what we do, we put on ourselves, or maybe others put on us. But I don't think I know the Lord doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
You know, He calls us to come humbly before Him, but boldly, but humbly. That's something we put on ourselves or others, and an expectation maybe in our culture too.
Yeah. Anthony, what's your thought on this? You think we become too perfect in leading worship? And if someone tries to be authentic, can they be? Can they be vulnerable? Is it good to be vulnerable to your church? Or will you be seen as weak?
Well, I mean, I think that the best, at least the leaders that have been able to speak into my life, have always been the types that, I perceive as being the most authentic. That are just about. They wear it all on their sleeve. I think as far as being perfect, I think the hard part about it is that we wrestle with wanting to appeal to a mass of people, and it's tough because it's easy to throw stones at the production aspect of things when our culture has become used to the entertainment value. And I'm not saying that it's right or wrong in a church, but I think the church is trying to appeal to a culture that's used to seeing commercials every 5 minutes. Mm-hmm. I think it's appealing. Like we're trying to move quick. Mm-hmm. And I think that the culture that we grew up in our churches anyways, the personal cultures that we had, there was a little bit more imperfection. Based on, at least in my particular experience, based on numbers. Mm-hmm. So it was the person in the room that could sing the best, but that actually really at times wasn't the best singer out. Mm-hmm. To the rest of the world, it was really interesting at times. But
because we didn't have auto-tune back then.
That's right.
That's all it is.
But so I think churches wrestle with wanting to appeal and draw people in with a good heart to want to eventually minister to them and have them fall in love with Jesus. That's the foundation of it. But I think the issue then isn't about the lights and the production. It's about, are we doing life with them, on the back end of things. Is it that we're, I look at worship music too as it's lost a little bit of its potency because it used to be about singing songs based on where the church, maybe even the particular church, like not the big C, but just like the church located on the corner of whatever such and such street. It used to be about, let's sing a song because we came out of this and God rescued us from this. And so they would write a song and then sing that song. Mm. And then somewhere along the way, an A&R guy from a label happened to go to that church and said, man, more people need to be singing this song. And then started promoting that song. And then next thing you know, we have these massive worship records that are selling more copies than a rock record, And so, I think I wouldn't be afraid in churches to get back to the idea that if you are a songwriter and you are a worship leader, not so much to try and market that song outside of your church. Start with your church. Say, hey, guys, I wrote this song. It's imperfect, It's very rough. But based on what we've been going through as a church, this is the prayer that was been laid on my heart. And I think those are some of the most, not only that, I think that has the tendency to draw everybody in the room in 1 minute. It becomes communal. Mm-hmm. Because man, that's us. Like that, he's singing or she is singing what we've been going through.
Exactly.
It's specific,
Exactly.
And so I don't know about the lights and the whatever. I think it's more about is the songs we're picking as a worship leader, are they the ones that our church should be singing? Because if that's the case, man, people will experience God. If it's just about what's new and fresh,
Right.
and it's a fast song, and I need another fast song, then that's maybe a different story. But I think God can even use that. I don't know.
Yeah.
Well, I hope so. Anyways, or else a lot of us are screwed.
Yeah. Love it. So Ryan, Claire, with Worship Leader and Friends, what's up? We finally met tonight. So what do you have to say about this?
There's a lot of good stuff here. I really like what Chris had mentioned, even just with messing up. There's been so many times where in a service and leading the last 20 years of worship and myself where I've messed up, but it's created some of the best moments where people just let loose. It was like an icebreaker in the moment. And then even just being authentic, I think it was last week I shared just how wrecked I was over the Las Vegas shooting. I just said, guys, in my welcome, I said, I'm just feeling a little heavy this morning. And the amount of people that came up to me after it was mind-blowing, just saying, my heart has been just so heavy this week just thinking about that. And so us as worship leaders being authentic and sharing even, our world's not perfect, and addressing things that are happening in the world as much as we can, or if our pastor allows. But a lot of good stuff here that we've been talking about.
Yeah.
So I come from a church. Our church is very. We do a lot of moving lights, kind of the venue style church. But my style
is what you're just talking about.
I mean,
no, our churches are pretty similar from what I've seen. I mean, they're really similar where we both lead. So there's some similarities there.
Oh, for sure.
And my pastor is definitely we strive in relevance. That's it's actually one of our values of our church is relevance. So we're looking at ways how can we reach unchurched people.
But who defines what's relevant? How do we know what relevant really is? If people just want to be authentic, Chris, how do we move forward? I mean, we talk about is this really an item that we need to get back to basics? But getting back to basics, I don't know even the way that sounds. That can mean anything. But what does being relevant really mean, and how is that defined?
I mean, I think the most important thing that we can do in these trainings is just teach people it's okay to be yourself. I think I can hear a 75-year-old man say something, but if he says it from his heart or he's just being real, relevance is out the window because it cuts through all that anyways. I mean, we're going to go up there tonight and play songs that sound like they're stuck in 1960 or 50, but somehow because we sing it with it's what's on our hearts and we're just being real with it, it cuts through some of that, like some of the current modern trends of so synthed out everything, to me, doesn't connect to me because it's too much of that. But if the people doing it are doing it in a way that's it's not about being trending, it's about, I genuinely love this 80s record and I genuinely like these sounds and I want to go for that for myself. I think it translates through. But I think if it's just about keeping up with the Joneses in the church sense, you lose all that. So really, when you talk about these trainings, if you can cut through all of that noise and just get to we're not going to sit here and teach you necessarily how to write the best song or how to do this or how to do that. We're going to more or less help you gain the confidence to say, I have what it takes to lead my church. And the more you lead out of confidence, the Lord speaks through that. It's like when you see Bono up there just grabbing the bull by the horns in that moment, half the time I don't think he knows what he's going to say. I think certainly he does after a while, but then those new moments arise where he's just speaking in the moment. He's in this place with all these people and just here it is. And I think that there's because of our leadership in the church, you're worried about losing your job or what your pastor's going to think if you sing. I worked at a church that the pastor criticized me for singing "Amen" too many times.
Wow!
If you're starting to deal with that crap, you're done.
Because
then you're going to be too worried about pleasing him than you are about just being yourself. You're scared, okay, well, he doesn't want me to do this, and it has nothing to do with not respecting authority, but just as much as you respect his authority to preach the word, he has to respect your authority to trust you and say, well, Pastor, maybe I don't want to do 2 fast songs up in the beginning and 3, like let me kind of go with what I'm feeling this week. Maybe I do open with a slow song, or maybe open with a song that's just a testimony of what's going on with me. Singing can be just as much teaching as the sermon can be. And I think we lose sight of that because he just wants you to click it on, get them with their hands in the air, and that can become an idol too, is worshiping the idea that we need to provoke this kind of response. All worship is acknowledging who God is, right?
But do people know how to respond, though? If you want to evoke that kind of response, do you really know that's what they want?
What do you mean? As far as like lifting their hands or? Well,
anything. I mean, it's going back to relevancy. I mean, how do you define what relevancy is between like somebody's waist size to their age, to a certain kind of music, and you call that relevant? That like you have to dress a certain way or to appeal a certain way to be relevant, or is it really more about the heart?
Right. Well, I think too that we get away from I think it goes back to the response though, because that's how we gauge if something's a worship song. If it's like getting people to lift their hands and raise their voices. When people come to our concerts, they don't really do that stuff. There are times I wish they would, and I want to be like, get off and raise your hands, but that's not going to help anybody. Ultimately, it's
not for you to say.
Right. So why are we trying to gauge that as a whole?
Exactly.
Because
successful worship
you have,
service.
elevation where you can get 7,000 people with their hands in the air and saying like, now is the time to lift your hands. I mean, I can't judge that and say that that's not, or it is a worship experience because I haven't been there to experience it. But I'm saying the problem is when we start matching everything versus that, which is where I think in conferences we've gotten too much into this routine of, even with a lot of conferences, the labels control the conferences. Mm-hmm. The labels buy into it, so they get a certain amount of spots to push their artists in these places. Mm-hmm. So really, then you could say, how much is money controlling all this too?
Exactly.
I mean, we can go down the line and say it goes into all these different things versus, hey, I like this one worship leader because he's just great, but no one's going to come because of the name, so I get that. But you know what I mean? Like it can play out into a lot of different facets. But I think in these cases of this conference, it's like, how can we teach people to just, I have an afro and it's stuck in the 70s, and there's been times where having an afro was cool, and then times where a bunch of people who were famous had afros, and I got compared to all those famous people, and I was like, well, I had it 15 years ago too. You just didn't know it.
That's because you're the Afro Elvis.
But
goes out of style.
But I'm just being me no matter what. Ryan's going to be him, even when it's trending and when it's not trending. It's like that's how he loves to sing. He loves Johnny Cash. He has these really strong influences, and that's how he channels what he loves, like we all do. But it's like, it's hard to say, like, because I don't think anything that I'm doing is trending at all. Like, I don't think anything that I'm writing is going to be in the top 50 of CCLI. I've tried a lot to be like, man, I would love to write a song that, just being honest, like, who hasn't thought that?
But then you're not being who God's called you to be.
Right.
If you're trying to target yourself to be trending, then you're not truly being yourself.
Yeah. But we get this impression that by writing that the Lord is that the Holy Spirit is more on that than it is on something that isn't trending, which isn't true.
No, God copyrighted that for me, so it is true. I want to know this. I was having lunch with Daryl today, he's like in his mid-60s, and he's a guitar player on the worship team. And so he was saying, I'm just now getting back, but I'm only playing like maybe once a month. And I said, well, what have you, I just got to know him, like, what have you done all your life? And he said, he's a carpenter. He builds homes and everything else. And he said, but I wish, and then he stopped talking. And I said, you wish what? And he said, well, if I didn't, and he had a hard time saying it. And I said, what did you want to do that you feel like you passed up years ago? And he said, playing in a band, making music. And I said, so you're how old? And I said, so why is it late now? Why is it too late? There's so many worship leaders that are aging. There are so many guys doing music that are aging, and they think, I don't make the cut because I don't look this, I don't dress that, I don't listen to this, whatever it is. And they're afraid that maybe their pastors are going to let them go, or they can't get hired by a church. They have nowhere else to run to, nowhere else to minister because they feel like their time is up. Is that true?
I would say, too, the idea about, like when you were talking about relevancy with this guy, too. One of my best friends just told me the other day, he said, the way you can tell a church, the way that you can tell if a church is relevant is if when people come to that church, no matter the style or form of whatever it is, if they come to that church and they walk in the doors and they leave, if they leave wanting to be a better person, to stop looking at pornography, to treat their wives better, to love their neighbor, that's relevancy. That your church is relevant. If they come in and they leave the same, and nothing in that service provoked them to want to change a thing about their lives, then your church is struggling with relevancy. So I would say personally, like we do a festival in New York where we bring in worship leaders. And sometimes the best worship leaders, at least personally for me, like Catherine Scott, right? It's a perfect example.
Exactly.
I think for her, when's the last time we've seen her in the magazine that is appealing to worship leaders? Not very often anymore. Right. But I'll tell you what, when she gets up and leads worship, it's powerful. It makes me want to change something in my life. It draws me to want to be closer to God. And so I would say she's relevant. She's still relevant. I would say to the 60-year-old man that's sitting there going, I'm not sure if a church would want me. If he's true to himself, if what he wants to do is lead others to Christ, and he lets that be how he shapes his set list, then it doesn't matter how he looks. People are going to hear him sing and play and lead, and they're going to be like, there's something about that I want, and I want to change my life in order to get it. And so too many times we do throw around the word relevancy, but how do you know? I think it's simple. Does your church love the people enough, like Jesus would, where they have an encounter with us and they say, I got to change something's wrong with my life. I got to change something, because I can't just stay the same again, for another day. Yeah. And so I think some weekends we get that right. Some weekends we're not. Some weekends we're going to totally miss the mark. Sure. But for the most part, that's the goal.
But that goes back to what you're saying. It's okay. It's okay to make those mistakes. You're going to make them. You're not perfect. You're not Jesus. You're not even Hillsong United. And it's okay because no one expects you.
Let's set the record straight. We all love Hillsong United.
Of course.
So, we're not dogging anything.
No, of course. But we want to set the record straight that Hillsong does what Hillsong does because of who they are.
Right.
But we have to lead our churches in who we are.
Right. Yeah. And Jeremy was saying the other day in the car when we were talking about this very thing when he got on his We Worship production thing, was that he feels a lack of prayer in our churches. That we've lost sight of teaching leaders how to pray and teach others how to pray. And I'd say that's fairly spot on. I mean,
it's become like what happens beyond the line of where the stage is what happens at church, and out there, and I think with the production thing, if your heart's in the right place and it's, you're really centered on Jesus, you're going to be okay. But I think the tendency is to see the Hillsongs and to see the Bethels, and we're visual. We're just taking all this stuff in, and it's like I want to mirror that.
All right. So then, I love that. That brings me to an idea, a question I have, Kevin. What do you say to the 20-year-old who's watching or listening right now that says, where's my model, though?
What do I look to?
Or a pastor, Rich.
What do I look to? What do you say to the 20-year-old who's listening, who's watching right now, and says, yeah, but when I see these kind of churches and these kind of worship teams, that's what I want to do?
Right. It's funny that Jared mentioned that, or Anth mentioned that Jared mentioned about prayer. I've felt that strongly recently about prayer. And for a young person who's maybe just growing up in the church or maybe just new to the church, I think you have to look at who you're serving. I think of Jesus washing the disciples' feet, like even what Ryan was saying about relevance. It's like, who are you serving? Who are you trying to lead in worship? If you're trying to lead the unchurched, and maybe you have a church that looks like a movie theater, or it's not even within the four walls of a traditional church. Mm-hmm. If you're serving a church of people that has 60-plus-year-old farmers like my church, coming in there with lights and smoke and cool backdrops might not be the way to go.
Right.
If you're trying to serve your skater friends who are lost, or your friends who are tripped out on drugs or wanting to kill themselves, and you're talking about young people with suicide and different things, maybe you buy a cool keyboard or something. Mm-hmm. But I think it starts with prayer and realizing who you are first, and recognizing that God accepts you for who you are, and looking to, if you take Jesus off the throne in your heart and you put Hillsong or Elevation or Brothers McClurg or Ryan Clair or anyone there, then you're in trouble, because you're going to be seeking to go after what somebody else is doing rather than the gifting God's placed on your heart. And God, if you are musical or gifted, I knew I was from a young age, just art, music, skateboarding, that sort of culture. You have to trust God's gifted you in a way to serve those people around you.
Yeah.
And not anyone more than those people around you. I think too often, I was thinking about this earlier, like the Great Commission of going, spreading the gospel throughout the entire world. Sometimes we try to do that. Meanwhile, there's people right in your own room or in your own backyard that you're not even ministering to. That, and that's the world to you.
Yeah.
Preach the gospel to the world, to your own world.
Mm-hmm.
But
cool.
I don't know.
Chris, take us home.
I don't know. I think that was pretty good. I think ultimately you have to bring who you are to the art form.
Who you are, your demographic.
Right. I mean, if there's a way to, like the Brian Dirksen song about level ground, we're all on a level playing field.
Right.
If, with these conferences coming up, if there's a way to take some of these artists you're talking about and strip all that stuff away in a way that's level ground, where people feel like, you're not teaching me the form as much as I'm watching you be who you are inside of the Lord, and just being honest with that. Mm-hmm. And if I can learn to catch some of that, even though it's a scary thing, we're going to have more trendsetters because of more people just doing what they love versus following the trends. You know what I mean? Because it always starts with just doing what you love and not, anybody in music who's ever had an influence on anything couldn't get signed by millions of record labels. For Jimi Hendrix had to go to England before anybody got it. It was like so different, think about that a little bit. Like these guys that actually changed the world, for a long time no one even cared. You know what I mean?
So we gotta go. We got like 15 minutes.
So go to England is what I'm saying.
Go to England.
Can I plug something there real quick? And I think whatever I was touching on, even what Chris was saying, and I want to ask Ryan even maybe speaking to this. And I think that, and this is a plug, but in our Old Bear community at Old Bear back home, I feel like that's what, when artists come, that's what they're sensing. And I have to say, in a way, maybe just because we don't care what other people think, or that we're just following our hearts, that
we're just used to not selling any records.
Right,
so we don't
exactly. So when artists come, it's like you're not going to sell any so but you get to be yourself.
Right.
But
so
I
want to ask Ryan, like, if that is that like what he, you're coming to New York from Minnesota, it's like, why? Like, if we're following and walking with our gifts, I feel like that's kind of what's been happening in the Old Bear.
Well, I think his record does have potential to sell records, even though ours don't. So.
Well, for me,
you got to.
just real quick, as I've been writing songs for a long time, but I also spent a lot of years as a worship leader trying to fit the worship leader mold, like trying to write songs that sounded like so influenced by Bethel and the stuff they're doing. That was a big influence for me. I was doing a lot of their songs, and I wanted that electric guitar tone. I wanted to play like Jeffrey Cundy, and and that was a big influence at a time. But on the side, I was listening to folk music, the stuff that really inspired me, and that's what I was listening to. That's the kind of music that's always influenced my life ever since the punk rock days, I guess, in high school. But that's what I listened to, and every time I tried to write a worship song that sounded like Bethel, it just wasn't me.
Yeah.
And going to probably another plug, but 10,000 Fathers Worship School, I went there, and they were really good about telling us to write songs that are true to who we are. And I started writing these songs, and I was encouraged by the feedback of people saying, dude, it's different, but it's you, I mean, it was a song that bring me to tears when I sing it, because it came from a place that was meaningful to me and not written for, is this going to work in my church? And now I'm getting people going, hey, play that song at church, Wow. So I think that's where, for me, it's working.
That's home. Good. Ryan, Claire, Chris, Kevin, Jeremy, Anthony, thank you guys for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
And guys, we're doing this. We're starting this tour together. So with Worship Team Training, Ryan, Claire, Brothers McClurg. This is the first, and we're going to be working on this, playing it out. Barry's a big part of that. He left the room, but he's still a big part of it, though. And so we're just praying that God puts this stuff together, and he just lays out the plan that he's already begun right now. So guys, just watching this, you want to know more, you want to learn more about what we can do with your church, just head to worshipteamtraining.com. You know where to find us. Check out Brothers McClurg, their website.com. Also Ryan, Claire, get their music. You are going to be lifted up and inspired, because that's what God is doing in their heart, and it's just an awesome, amazing gift that you guys share that with others. So thank you.
Thanks for having us.
All right, we'll see you guys.
This has been a Worship Team Training broadcast and digital production with your host and training director, Brandon Dempsey. Worship Team Training provides live workshops and online resources to help inspire, create, and transform the leading of worship. We'll see you again right here on worshipteamtraining.com.